Have you ever wondered what it's like to take minimalism to the extreme? A few years ago, I decluttered many of my possessions in my old apartment. Not only did it make my living space more spacious, I also felt lighter and happier. But I always wondered, would that feeling increase if I stripped my living space down to the bare essentials? So when I had the opportunity to live in an almost empty apartment for a week, I decided to put it to the test. I tried extreme minimalism for 7 days, and it turned out it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. The rules. I'll be living in a practically empty apartment with just the bare essentials. An inflatable bed, few pillows, a plant, my laptop for work, and some basics like toiletries and kitchen items to cook my food and make my coffee. Because there's just no way I'm giving up my coffee. Even I have my limits. Day 1. I've been a minimalist for a few years now, but lately I felt a bit lost. I had to leave my old apartment and take on a few stressful projects, which left me feeling overwhelmed at times. So living in a nearly empty apartment for a week seemed like the perfect opportunity for a reset, like a little retreat. I had also always wondered what extreme minimalism would be like. Could I do it? Would I miss anything? Would I love it or hate it? It's strange to be in such a big empty space. There's nothing that dampens the sound. Everything just bounces off the wall. I'll try to edit as much as I can in post, but it's echoey here. It also feels too empty, unfinished. I have trouble looking around and just being with it. There's this voice in my head that tells me to go out and buy a bunch of furniture. After spending the afternoon finishing my work, I do something I normally never do. I lay down on my bed and spend a good 20 minutes cloud gazing. There's something very comforting about seeing the clouds just rolling by. Day 2. I slept well. The inflatable bed kind of makes it feel like I'm camping, but in a home. It reminds me of the holidays I spent with my family and friends when I was younger in the summer. There are no chairs or sofas here, so I made a makeshift seat by placing one pillow on the ground and another against the wall. They're quite firm, so it's not too bad for a temporary chair. I work for a few hours until it's time for a simple lunch. I've noticed that my mind has begun to quiet down. When I look out the window, I see people in a rush, getting ready for school, going to work, going about the day. It's quite a contrast to how I live inside. Here, it's as if time is slowing down. I guess it's the lack of stimuli. I'm naturally gravitating towards reading a book instead of grabbing my phone. I visited a bookstore a few days ago because I wanted to be more intentional about how I spent my time this week. And I felt that reading a good novel would help. I chose Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami, which I'm quite enjoying so far. I also feel reflective today. Having so few items around me reminds me of this quote. Too many people spend money they earned to buy things they don't want to impress people they don't like. I found minimalism liberating when I first encountered it. For the first time, I started to question what I spend my money on and why. It was empowering. I could still maintain a high quality of life while reducing my monthly expenses by decluttering things I no longer cared about and becoming more intentional about my spending going forward. Day 3. Blaise Pascal famously said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." And I'm starting to feel how true that is. One thing I'm noticing after a few days is how there's just nothing happening here. If I had to define my living space in one word, I'd say absence. I'm grateful for this plant. It adds a bit of life and color to the space. But for the rest, I'm responsible for my own entertainment. find myself moving to the bedroom more regularly. It's more comfortable to read on the bed for longer periods of time. And in the evening, when it's dark outside, it just feels odd to sit in such a big, empty living room. So I decided to spend my evenings on the bed. Tonight, I'm watching Once Upon a Time in America. Day 4. I start the day by doing some work. So far, I've been working from my makeshift 2-pillow chair, but it's become so uncomfortable that my back started to hurt. So I decided to work from the kitchen, where the countertop can double as a standing desk. After a few hours, it's time for lunch, followed by a cup of tea. It's strange, I can see into the apartments of neighbors across the street. Some homes look well designed, while others seem more cramped. Either way, it's a stark contrast to how I'm living this week. I feel like I'm in my own world. I'm noticing how little I need to get by. I could use a bit more comfort, to be honest, but I'm curious if the neighbors ever sit down and question what they spend their money on and what the ratio is between clutter and items they truly care about. What I've come to realize is that I care deeply about having control over how I spend my time. One of the main benefits of minimalism is that it can provide that freedom. By decluttering the items that no longer serve me and reducing my living expenses, I'm able to live below my means. And with that comes the freedom to live life on my own terms. One way this shows is that I can choose when to work and when to take a longer break, allowing me to go for a walk in nature on a weekday afternoon. In the evening, I bring a friend up to speed about my experiment over dinner and then call it a night. Day 5. Last week, I had a conversation with a friend who's unhappy in his job. He would love to do something that feels more meaningful, but he also wants to renovate the attic of his house to create more rooms for his family and add a second bathroom. He estimated that this would cost over $100,000. Then he said something that struck me. It's not necessary, but it's nice. Yet, just minutes before, he had mentioned that this renovation would keep him stuck in his current job because leaving would mean taking a pay cut that he now couldn't afford. Hearing that made me feel sad. It sounded like a classic example of wearing golden handcuffs. There was once a time when I viewed money in a similar way. When I received my salary, I'd think, how can I spend it? I justified it by telling myself, my job is stressful, I work so hard. What's the point of all of that if I can't have fun and spend it? But what I've learned through minimalism is that beyond basic needs, there are very few things that money can buy that have a long-term positive effect on my happiness. One thing that's free but provides me with a lot of value is listening to podcasts. Today, I'm listening to an interview with Mo Goddard on the Diary of a CEO. Even though the conversation is mainly about reducing stress, he briefly touches on minimalism. When debating whether to keep or discard his humidifier, which he hadn't used for a year and a half, he plugged it in only to find out it didn't even work anymore. He then points out that many of us have things in our homes that, when not used, cause us stress. You might think that it doesn't affect your life, but it takes up space, it demands attention, and requires time to clean. Moreover, when you're not using an item, you're depriving it of the opportunity to fulfill its purpose. A humidifier is meant to humidify. It's not supposed to sit in a closet and collect dust. I work for a few hours until it's time for lunch, but not before. At its core, minimalism is about removing excess and distractions to create space for what's truly important. Minimalism is not just about getting rid of stuff. Decluttering is merely a means to an end. The bigger goal is to be more intentional, take control of your life, and have more time and space for what's most essential to you. I feel like extreme minimalism misses this point. The focus seems to be more on reducing possessions to a minimal number, but it doesn't address the question, then what? In my experience this week, extreme minimalism goes too far. I enjoy making these videos, for example, but I have no dedicated office or even a desk to work on them. That's where I'm starting to feel a disconnect. By stripping everything down to the bare minimum, I've realized that there's a point where minimalism stops being practical and starts becoming restrictive. It feels like a constant compromise. Do I really need to sacrifice comfort or convenience just to meet an arbitrary standard of minimalism? I think the key is finding balance. It's less about living with as little as possible and more about being conscious of what truly adds value to your life. For me, having a few more items or a dedicated workspace doesn't mean I'm failing at minimalism. It means I'm making choices that work for me. At the end of the day, minimalism should serve us, not the other way around. It's not about deprivation. It's about freedom, but you have to define what freedom looks like for you. If you're interested in minimalism but don't know where to begin, check out my free How to Get Started with Minimalism checklist in the description below. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach. Minimalism should be a tool, not a set of rigid rules. The point is to live more intentionally, and that looks different for everyone. Day 6. I feel a bit grumpy. The last few days, I've been waking up feeling really cold. I even had to take a shower this morning just to warm up. The inflatable bed I sleep on, it doesn't retain much heat. And there's also this cold draft coming in from underneath the balcony door, which I've tried to block with a pillow, but it doesn't quite work. After breakfast and coffee, my mood improves. I'm in a good routine today. I do some work in the kitchen, meditate in the afternoon, do more work, listen to the 30th anniversary edition of Oasis Definitely Maybe, journal about my experience this week, and lie down for some more cloud spotting during my afternoon break. I'm also close to finishing Kafka on the Shore. The book features two protagonists who never meet. 15-year-old Kafka Tamura, who is searching for meaning and a sense of identity, and Satoru Nakata, an elderly man who somehow can communicate with cats. I'm not entirely sure what the book is about, but perhaps a good book should raise questions rather than provide answers. And we as readers are meant to find the answers within ourselves. It's similar to this experiment I'm doing this week. I've seen other people living in an extremely minimal way, and it made me wonder, would it be right for me? And do I still resonate with minimalism in the same way I did when I first learned about it years ago? Day 7. Today is the last day. As I pack up my stuff, the question is, will I become an extreme minimalist? Definitely not. This was a fun experiment for a week. It helped me reflect on my values, and I realized that I don't need much to feel content. But I also realized that this lifestyle is too Spartan for me. I got bored and it's pretty bad for my back. I'm glad I did it though. It's one thing to read about something, but something entirely different to experience it. I feel the law of diminishing returns applies here. Less is more, but only to a certain point. You can gain most of the benefits of minimalism by decluttering your possessions, lowering your expenses, and setting clear rules for how to spend your money going forward. Beyond that though, I don't think there's much to be gained from discarding of almost all your possessions, unless you want to live like an ascetic. I'd even argue that there's a tipping point beyond which life just becomes more complicated again. To me, minimalism is not only about how much you need and then settling for the bare minimum. That's too extreme for me. Minimalism is not a numbers game. It's a means to an end, not the end goal itself. Minimalism can be a tool to help you create space for something that matters most. I don't just live to survive, I also want to feel alive. And a bit of comfort is nice for that. For example, last week I really missed having a sofa. When I came home, I had nowhere to put my keys, and I couldn't invite any friends over for dinner because I had nowhere for them to sit. This experiment has strengthened my resolve to live by minimalist principles though. To be intentional about what I spend my money on, and not keep items because, who knows, it might be useful one day in the future. I believe that in a society that celebrates consumerism, there are elements of minimalism that almost anyone can benefit from. The key is to be intentional about what and who you surround yourself with, what you spend your money on, and the information you take in. If you want to learn more about that, a good place to start is my video, How to Want What You Already Have, which you can check out right here. So thanks for watching, I hope to see you in the next one, and have a great day. Bye-bye.